Hello students, hope you all are good. So in today's module we'll be discussing about tissues, right? Very interesting chapter as we have already cleared all the terms related to cell. Fine, in our previous chapter that was the fundamental unit of life. Now multicellular organisms that are made up of millions of cells, these cells show division of labor. What is division of labor now? Each cell performs a particular function efficiently, right? Can you give me some example? You might be thinking of some various example. Now, for example, in human beings, muscle cells contract and relax to cause movement of a body part. Similarly, students, nerve cells or our neurons, they carry messages. Blood flows to transport food, oxygen, hormones and waste material. Fine? So, we see that cells which specialized in a functions, they are grouped together and form a tissue, right? So, we can say that tissue is a group of cells, right? It's a group of cells that are similar in structure and origin. Fine? Origin is come from same parent cell and perform similar functions, right? Now students, you can see here in this picture, see, this one is the combination of, the cells, fine, these one are the cells, you can see here. And now, when the cells, they combine together, they form a structure that is known as tissue, right? Now, tissue, they form organs, and these organs, they form the system. Now look here very carefully. The examples are given onto your right hand side. Students, we can consider a cells like we have nucleus or mitochondria, right? Now, talking about the tissue, what is tissue here? For example, I am taking cardiac muscle. It is a tissue, right? Now, what is organ here? Cardiac muscle is basically related with which organ, students? Heart, human heart, right? And heart basically is a part of which system? It is part of circulatory system. I hope I am clear, students. This is just the basic concept that you should know. Now, what is the utility of tissue in multicellular organisms? Multicellular organism, students, as we know that they have millions of cells and each group of cell is called tissue, right? So, group of cell is termed as tissue. And remember one thing, students, that it performs a special function efficiently, right? Like that, we have already discussed this thing that our muscle cells perform the contract and relaxation to bring the movement, our nerve cell, our blood, our vascular tissue and so on. And that is why, very important thing, that these multicellular organisms, they show division of labor. Fine? For example, like if I am having respiratory system in my body, right? So if I am having a respiratory system, so does this respiratory system performs the circulation also? No, right? It only helps in the respiration process, right? Similarly, we have excretory system. Fine, it has its own function. This is what the division of labor is. I hope I'm clear, students. Now, we should know what exactly the difference between the animal tissue and the plant tissue, right? So you can read out the first point here. Since animals are mobile, so they require more energy and hence more living tissue are required. So we know, students, we are also animals, we require a lot of energy, right? Because we have to move, we are mobile organisms. But talking about the plant tissue, they do not have to move, right? That is why they do not require much energy. I hope I am clear, students. Coming on to the second point, which says that animals move from one place to another in search of food, shelter, etc. Hence, they need more energy and their more tissue are living. Very simple point, students. Of course, We move from one place to another for what? For food, for shelter, right? For food, for shelter, for all these things. That is why we need more energy. And talking about plants, then here, most tissue, they provide structural strength here. Which strength? Structural strength, right? And most of these tissue, they are dead, right? Now students, coming on to the next point, that cell growth is uniformly distributed here. Fine, it is uniformly distributed. We know that a cell keeps on dividing. Fine, it has to divide. Like we have done the process mitosis, meiosis, so it's uniformly distributed. But talking about growth in plant tissue, that is limited to a certain region, right? It is only limited to a certain regions. Now students, structural organization of organs and organ system is more specialized and complex. We all know this thing, students. See, our body is having a kind of structural organization of organs which is more complex, right? But talking about the plant tissue, that is not much complex in nature. Fine, we have a lot of organs, complete systems, they perform different functions, so we are a bit complex organisms, right? I hope this thing is clear to each one of you students. Now moving on to the next part, that is very, very important, students, and it is the differentiation of the plant tissue. Fine, now we have cleared the term, what exactly the tissue is, what exactly the division of labor is, what is the difference between plant tissue and animal tissue. Now we will be studying about two different types of tissue, students. One is plant, another one is animal. Fine, so coming on to the first part, that is the plant tissue is basically divided into two different tissue. The first one we have is the meristematic tissue, students, and second one we have is the permanent tissue, right? Now talking about the meristematic tissue here, these tissue, or basically in these kind of tissues, what exactly happens, that cells, they are capable of cell division. It means cell keeps on dividing. Like for example, one cell is this, it keeps on dividing, then becomes two cell, finally again it divides, so on. Fine, this is what it exactly forms. Now students, moving on to the permanent tissue, right? So it is basically divided into two categories. One is simple, another one is complex. So permanent tissue is of two types. Now first of all, we should know what exactly the term permanent means here. Fine. So here what was happening in case of meristematic, cells were in division state, right? But talking about permanent, so the word itself indicating, students, that here the cells become mature. Very, very important thing. The cells become mature. If they become mature, it's very obvious that they are incapable of cell division, right? They are incapable of cell division. Now students, coming on to the simple permanent tissue, right? Simple permanent tissue. Now simple permanent tissue are the tissue that composed of single type of cells. Which type of cells? Single type of cells, right? Only single type of cell is present. But talking about complex, as the name itself suggesting, complex, it means it composed of more than one type of cells. I hope I am clear with each and every term, students. Now talking about the simple one. See here, talking about the simple one, students. So simple is divided into three tissue, right? We have parenchyma, we have collenchyma, and we have sclerenchyma, right? Parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, that is PCS, right? PCS. Now talking about the complex one, students, the complex one. Fine, it is further divided into two categories. First one we have is the xylem, right? And another one we have is the phloem. Fine, and you must have studied these two terms in your previous classes, students. You know what is the function of xylem, you know what is the function of phloem, right? So now xylem is having some components, fine, like xylem fiber, xylem parenchyma, xylem vessels, and tracheids, right? Similarly, students, talking about the phloem, it is also having some of the components like sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fiber, and phloem parenchyma, right? So this is what all about today's topic, students. I hope this thing is clear to each one of you. Very simple thing we have discussed, right? First of all, we know that what exactly the tissue is, where the combination of cells form the tissue, then they become organs, and finally they becomes the system. Fine. And they show the division of labor. Now we have discussed the difference between animal tissue and plant tissue. Now students, we have just gone through exactly the differentiation of the plant tissue, right? So there are two types, meristematic, permanent. Fine. Then permanent is of further two types, simple, complex. Then simple is again of three types, parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, and complex is of xylem and phloem. Now we will be studying about all these tissue in detail in our next module. Thank you everyone.